A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
You might know that one of the practical strengths of so many Christian mission organisations is their care for children. You'll also know that there are some key themes in the Bible around what Christian mission is called to do, including protecting children and teaching them about God. Like Jesus said in Matthew 19:14, "Let the little children come to me and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." Our special guest today sees his mission to deliver compassionate care and transformative opportunities to orphans and children facing poverty. He's been inspired by the call to serve from a higher purpose, to extend love, support and protection to the marginalised. David Ryan is the founder and senior leader of Heart for Kids. He's a businessman with a passion for extending and adapting the Christian mission. Welcome to 2020 today, David Ryan.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having us, Tosh.
It's great to have you with us. And we first had you on 2020 back in 2014.
It's a while ago.
It's a while ago. And we really welcome you back here today to hear about your innovative approach to doing missions and working between the business space and the ministry space. But you first got started in China, is that correct?
Yes, back in the mid-90s, and I had absolutely no intention of getting involved in overseas missions. Radar did not include China, and yet somebody asked me about going on a short-term mission team.
Isn't it amazing how often the call of God comes on people who just love the Lord? He places them somewhere, they've got no idea what to do, but lo and behold,
He sneaks up on you.
He sneaks up on you, and He has a plan greater than ours, doesn't He?
Absolutely, always.
And what was that first trip like for you?
Look, it was scary in some ways. It was a bike riding trip.
Wow.
So if people could see me, you would see that I'm not built for push bike riding, and I was worsely built then. But it was, push bike riding. It was a fantastic time of just meeting people, and being invited into their homes and talking about life.
Yeah, and how did that bring forward the call of God on you?
I was walking in a village surroundings, and there was nobody around me. I was on my own having some quiet time. And it was as if I literally heard God say to me, things are going to change.
Wow.
I didn't know what that meant. I had no expectations, but that resulted in resigning from managing a family business after 20 years.
Okay.
And going to Bible college at Tabor, studying for 4 years. And then it became, having a business, but also full-time ministry. And
the trip, when you went there and the call of God came to you, the burden came upon your heart, did you ever see it progressing to how it has unfolded now?
No, not at all. When I said yes to going on the team, I just thought this is a nice way to see China in a Christian ministry kind of way.
Yeah.
And I was looking, a month down the road. I was just speaking with some people the other day, and I pointed out that in about 25 years ago, I was asked if I would lead a short-term mission team to China, to an orphanage area. And in a month's time or so, I'll be leading team number 65.
Wow.
I did not see 65 teams down the road. I saw one.
And as a fresh Westerner to the developing world, what was that like, getting to see the granular side of life in that part of the world?
China was a very different place then and to what it is now. It really did. It was confronting.
Yeah.
In many ways, not just the meeting of people and the eating of foods that I'd never sampled before and that sort of things, but just, I guess, seeing the differences in people's lives and outlook to life.
And if there's a David Ryan 25 years ago listening today, what would your advice be to them if they're considering going on a mission trip or not?
Say yes.
Say yes.
It's as simple as that, like I've come across so many people who said yes to going on a team thinking they were going to do this or that or something else. One of the guys on one of our Mercy teams thought he was going to come and fix things around the home, repair doors and wiring and so on.
Right.
And he said to me, you tricked me. I didn't do any of that. All I did all the time was care for babies and toddlers. And I was so surprised I actually loved it.
That's amazing, isn't it? How God, as you said, sneaks up on you. You think you're going for one reason. And some people who go on mission trips, they think, can I afford it? It's a few $1,000s. But everyone that I've ever spoken to, myself included, coming back from a mission trip, you never regret the spending of those dollars, do you?
No. And it's a valid question that people ask, would it be better if I spent that couple of $1,000s by giving it to you to do the work? And that is a true and valid question. But so much comes from going and seeing. I could have given a couple of $1,000s back in 1996. But China Heart for Kids, serving in 3 countries and so on, would never have happened if I'd have done that. I needed to go and see.
And so you're there in China. And what was your connection, I should say, with the children in the area? So you're there riding bikes and you're visiting people and you're eating food and you're in these undeveloped areas. But then you start China Heart. How did that progress take place? I
think what struck me was the simplicity of kids' attitude towards things, and but their huge needs. Somebody was sharing with me one night how they were annoyed with the kids who kept coming up to them with their hands out, wanting something, assuming they're wanting money. All the kids were after was a pencil.
Wow.
And that 30-odd years later has stuck in my heart. I remember exactly where we were, and it's recognizing that it's the simple needs of life that these kids and their families need. And so it's not big things.
Yeah.
And so these years later, we're doing a lot of big things, and we're helping tens of thousands of people with safe water and so on. But it starts with that simple saying yes, and I'll help you.
Yeah, I guess if you had have sent the couple of $1,000 across to help someone else do that work, it doesn't place you in the midst of those things. It doesn't give you God's compassion for the people around you. It doesn't allow your world to be expanded. I mean, you're going to stay here in Australia, doing the everyday work, getting on with everything, but you often do come back dramatically changed from those experiences.
I don't think after 64 teams so far, I've known any of our team members to come home the same person as when they left. Because God can't not touch you in the going. What you see with your eyes, you suddenly are struck with it.
And so you're there in China, and you've heard the children asking for pencils. How did you feel God speaking to you? What was it that was happening in your mind of what were the first things that you could do?
I went to college, I guess, and improved my education and the rest of it. But as far as going back, I was then leading short-term teams to a local orphanage inside China, a government orphanage that we were just supporting because the kids didn't have a lot of carers. So when we came in with 25 people, we relieved the carers of a lot and gave the kids a lot of extra care that we would take for granted back here. So it grew through doing those teams to orphanages. It grew into opening our own foster apartments, sponsoring kids so they can stay in school, because a lot of them would be taken out of school at 12 or 13 years old. I still remember the very first young girl that we sponsored to stay in school. It was just, it still strikes a chord.
And for our listeners who may not understand why you would take a 12-year-old out of school, what prompts that in these communities?
Look, so many of these folk, they just don't have the income to be able to survive. So this young girl, the first girl that we sponsored or helped, she was sent along with a bunch of other kids to work in an electronics company. And so her future at 12 or 13 years old was soldering wires together, anything up to 12 and 14, 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. And we made a deal with her parents that we would send them the amount of money that she would send.
Oh, bro.
So that she could come out of that work. And she went to school in the same town where her sister was helping us as a translator when we were in the orphanage. And she got her education. She got jobs that were good jobs. She got married. She's got a couple of kids. And it's just been a beautiful story to watch unfold as God developed.
So instead of being subjected to a life of minimal wage labour and doing that for the rest of the decades of her life, she's now an educated young lady who has a chance of a profession.
Absolutely. And we see that time and time again. I I sat with one young man who got a job as in security in the government railways. We've got students who are just graduating now in their mid-year graduations who are going to be doctors and nurses because we were able to keep them in school.
Praise God.
It's just incredible to see God move.
Life, culture, and current events from a biblical perspective. 2020 on Vision.
David, you were telling us just before about a young lady who you were able to work with in China to pay for her school fees and to pay her parents for the cost that they would have, the benefit they would have made for her from essentially going into forced labour at that age.
Yeah.
And how has that particular relationship progressed?
Look, it's been wonderful to watch it happen over these years. You know, I got to know her whole family. We had a good relationship with her dad and her mum, and she came back to the city and got a job, got training in graphic arts and so on, and then in makeup and how to make up girls who were getting married, and get their dresses right and all of that sort of stuff that I know nothing about. And then she got a job in a small wedding shop in the town. That developed into a job in a bigger shop and then down to larger cities and to tier 1 cities as they're called. And she was just thriving, and she married a businessman from Indonesia.
Wow.
And they've got a couple of kids. And she's done so well simply because she could get an education. And that education is what releases kids into their future in so many ways.
And it's so accessible for just a few dollars here and a few dollars there.
Yeah, it really is. And it's just that the parents just don't have those finances. They're living off next to nothing, a field growing some crops, which it doesn't make a lot of money for them. No. It keeps them eating, and that's the whole name of the game. But her future just changed from that conversation with her dad when he said, yes, we would love your help. It wasn't that he didn't want help or was trying to oppress his daughter as such. It was just they had no alternative.
Yeah, the realities of life without social security in some of these nations, hey?
Absolutely. Yeah, I realise Australia has its challenges, and I'm not walking away from them at all, but we have so much more advocacy here for people in need.
And what would you say to the average Aussie who hasn't maybe been into the third world to see some of the challenges? How would you describe the life that a lot of folk are living in developing nations? Yeah,
look, people just don't really understand, and we can't understand what we haven't seen. I heard a young fellow, just a young teenager, giving a report back at a church recently. He'd been over to the Philippines on a short team with some of his family members and so on. And he said, until I went and saw, I just didn't know. And so, it's in the seeing that we can understand what these people are going through. And we realise that, so little goes so far.
It does in those nations. And if you want to give us a call and have a chat here today, you're more than welcome to call in on 1-800-316-316 or send us your thoughts with a text message on 0447 488 316. Our guest in conversation today is sharing with us around his work in Southeast Asia. This is David Ryan. And David, you come from a business background, and so you're there in China with a business background, riding bicycles, and the hand of God, the heart of God touches you.
Yeah.
And it's given you the capacity to lead some missions back into China. And now you've done you're doing number 65 soon?
Team 65 happens in November with 2 people from Australia, 2 from South Africa, and 2 from the US.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And with that whole concept of being just a business guy, going there on business, the call of God, it really overwhelmed and took over your business because you've had to expand your business opportunities to create a way to fund this. And from that, you've developed some theories and some disciplines around doing what you can do here so that you can do an even more impactful work overseas.
Yeah.
How did that transition take place for you?
Yeah, look, I guess my wife and I were having a discussion early in the piece when we gave birth, if you like, to China Heart, as it was known then, because it was only serving in China.
Yeah.
When we started serving in other countries, we felt we needed to rebrand, so to speak, and we
Sure.
became Heart for Kids.
Heart for Kids.
But we were talking early in the piece, and we just said to each other, we need to use the skills that God's gifted us with to do this ministry well, if you like.
Yeah.
You know, there was a lot of small ministries were struggling. They had what I and other people would call a poverty mentality. You know, try and scrimp and save, and don't print in colour, print in black and white, because it's 5 cents. You know, that kind of thinking. And we just felt, no, God's gifted us in these ways, and so we're going to use the skills to do things the best that we can in a business head. And it's that business continued on until earlier this year. And, you know, we were selling laser cutting and marking machinery around Australia and
Wow.
3D equipment and so on. I had a great team working there in the company, and my wife is one of the directors with me. And it was a fantastic platform. And God just used that to
Amazing. We'll come back to hear a little bit more of that in just a moment's time, but we've got a call come through from Camp Mountain in Queensland. This is Natalie. We want to welcome you to the show, Natalie.
Hi, Natalie.
Hello. Oh,
Hello, Natalie. Did you have a question or a comment?
more a comment, I guess, although a question would be possibly attached.
Yeah.
We've been involved with Ethiopia because we have ended up adopting children from Ethiopia. And when this was late 90s, when you actually stand there and smell it and feel it and experience, as you were saying, I can only completely agree, you come back very, very different. And the things that you thought mattered don't anymore.
Exactly.
And the things that you thought were a priority are really not. And it just changes your whole approach to life in general. And so recently we've been able to do some trips to Vanuatu to bring libraries to schools with no books,
Fantastic.
which, you know, doesn't sound terribly important, but it is, because it makes an enormous difference to their literacy. But I think unless you've actually stood there and seen it, you just can't possibly grasp it.
Natalie, just as you were saying that story about the books, it brought back a picture in my mind of a young Singaporean man. You know, this concept that it doesn't seem very important. Well, it was important to somebody. And this young Singaporean man, he was a lawyer by profession. He'd done his military training and so on. And the picture I have of him is sitting for the whole afternoon on a concrete floor in an orphanage holding a young baby or toddler. And, you know, he could have been doing anything. He could have been representing anybody in the law courts, but he was sitting on the floor holding that young child. And that afternoon, there was nothing more important to him or to the child than what he was doing. So rest assured, what you were doing had impact and made the difference in people's lives.
I just think it would be so amazing for all our young people at some, you know, early 20s, I don't know, to do something.
Absolutely.
And actually go and stand somewhere and smell it and feel it.
Yep. I've had my son on team when he was 13. I've had 8-year-olds on team, and just the changes that come in their lives. You can't manufacture that.
No, that's all I was going to say. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, Natalie, thank you for calling in and sharing your thoughts with us here at 2020 today.
Thank you.
All right, God bless. And if you want to call in, the number is 1-800-316 316, or you can shoot us a text at 0447 488 316. And we're talking here today with David about his mission that he's operating, looking after kids in the Southeast Asia area. And David, you were saying that you were selling industrial equipment in laser cutting around Australia, and the Lord really blessed that business.
Yeah, well, I'd grown up in a family business that my father started, making signs and mailboxes and stuff, and then we were asked about selling computer engraving machines when that started in the 80s, and that developed into lasers and 3D equipment. And, it was just a great way, but something that was said to me not long ago, and what Natalie just said, you know, the things that are important versus unimportant and the priorities. And in the end, I was not a great salesman for my own business, and I had a great sales team.
Yeah.
But I struggled, I realized at one stage, to try and say that if you buy this product, your life will be so fantastic. Because, it will be okay, it would be good, but God's got so much more.
Yes, he really does. And when the Lord takes over an area of your life, when you surrender something to God for the purposes of his kingdom,
Yes.
there's something, a power that such greater force gets behind than when we just try to live for ourselves. So it must have been interesting for you being on mission with God, trying to sell to people, telling them that their life's going to be better, knowing within your own heart, man, God is blessing me so much.
Yeah, and it had its great times and it had its challenges. I said in life group meeting once with my wife, I was asked, what's it like going and coming all the time? Out of Sydney, first world. The part of Sydney I live in is very nice, down in the Southern Shire, and so on. And I turned to my wife and I said, well, I think I'm better at it these days than I used to be, aren't I? And she looked at me and she didn't answer. And I thought, whoops, I think I've asked the wrong person this or something or other. And she said, well, you are better, but, it's not easy when you come back sometimes because God just touches you while you're there, and it pulls your heart, and to come back into the lovely Sydney and the rest of it was pretty darn hard.
Yeah, the veneer of life is so much more polished in Western countries.
Oh, yeah.
But the heart of life is so rich where people have so little, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
You were telling us before about how the Lord worked with your business to expand that and for the purposes of the kingdom. And for those who might just be joining us right now after news, what would you say has been the predominant factor with watching God expand that work?
I guess in many ways it was taking my hands off and letting God do what God wants to do. So often I think I have a tendency of saying, God, have your way, do your will, and then we put our thumbprint on it and try to make it look ours.
Who could do that?
And, taking your hand off is not easy in the business world. And, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But God, for many years, blessed us to be able to see a platform for us to do ministry in this way.
And if there are business owners in our Vision family who are listening in across Australia today and right now, what would your advice be to them if they're feeling the stirring of God, but they're just struggling to get maybe their pinky off the business or get a couple of fingers off? What would your advice be?
Wow, that's a big question. It really, I guess, starts with prayer. Because if you're thinking that you're hearing God say, take your hand off, and you may have misheard or you're just not sure which way to go, you've got to start with prayer. Because I couldn't have manufactured what he did in creating the business platform and the ministry platform. It just wouldn't have been in my mind without his prompting. So take your hand off, but pray and respond when God says to step.
I think of that scripture, draw close to God and he will draw close to you. I think for a business owner who has responsibility, you've got to pay for multiple staff, which are in turn paying for their children's school fees and paying for their mortgages. I mean, the responsibility on business owners, they don't broadcast it, but they carry a lot, don't they?
Well, my wife and I have always felt that pressure, if you like. We had a team who were a fantastic team of people who really looked at the place as if it was their own, as if it was family, one lady said to us a few years ago. And
what a great response from her.
Yeah, and, we just knew that we were doing it the way God wanted us to do it. But things come and go. That business we don't have anymore, but things come and go, and God changes directions, and the ministry keeps going, though. Nothing has changed in the ministry because the business isn't there now. But, God is still developing things, creating relationships with people and doing amazing things in these countries where we're serving.
And so you started off, David, in China, and we heard you share your story of the Lord changing your heart toward the concept of missions by that one young lady who you were able to support. How did things grow from there into what was China Heart?
Yeah, well, we developed a sponsorship program for kids to keep them in school, And today that is still supporting nearly 120 kids to make sure they're getting their education. We had an Australian lady who came and served with us, and a Singaporean lady came and served with us as we started a team in a Chinese city in the middle of China. And then that developed into a foster home, and this is how God moves. We were pushing and pushing, trying to open that foster home for ages. Yeah. Nothing shifted. And we just said, look, let's just leave it. Let's not keep pushing. It's almost depressing us that nothing's happening. Right. And about 6 weeks later, we got a phone call from the orphanage director. I've had this wonderful idea. Would you guys be able to take a child and foster and start something? Wow. That was not our breakthrough. That was God's breaking through. That was God's breakthrough. Yeah. And so from that one child, a home developed. Yeah, we had 2 foster apartments for babies and toddlers, around about 20 kids altogether, and a team of 24/7 IEs or aunties to care for those kids. It wasn't come during the day and then go home. It was 24/7. Wow. We had 3 staff who looked after the projects as a whole. The sponsorship projects, the kids in various villages and so on that we were mentoring and still mentor. We've had kids start with us in primary school and graduate from university. It's just been amazing to see how, again, God changes lives. Absolutely. Can you share with us a story of one of the kids that springs to mind right now? Yeah. You don't have to use a name, but the storyline would be great. Yeah, look, we had so many kids who were in rural villages, small country towns, sometimes not even towns, but just really genuine villages as such. And their parents, one that springs to mind, this little girl's dad was blind and had no sight. Right. Her mum had extremely low IQ. Right. The locals would refer to it in much more disparaging ways. But they were a lovely couple all the same and great to just sit and talk with. But she had no hope for her future. And she literally said that, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. And she was only like a 10-year-old or something like that. Wow. But again, she got through schooling and she's doing well. And her parents are doing well. And that's not an untypical story. The exact events may change, but the themes continue to be the same. And so how did you guys care for her as a blind child? Well, the main thing she needed was education. Her parents couldn't work and had nothing to send her to school and keep her in school. And, okay, a lot of school expenses are free, but that doesn't mean that food's free or books are free and, clothes and so on. Transport to get there. A lot of the kids actually stay at school all week because they just can't get backwards and forwards, and they'll come home. I met with one family, and they were an hour and a half's walk from school, and I'm talking up a hill. Wow. It's not a walk I would like to have done twice, and they would do it multiple times. So under those circumstances, it's just a matter of trying to break the back financially for them. We don't give them a scholarship that will make them rich by any means, Yeah. It's just breaking the back so that they can still go to school. So it gives them enough of an opportunity to take advantage of that, put their own sweat equity into it, and then they can essentially, with your help, forge a future for themselves? Yeah. I mean, we've had uni students who were falling asleep in class because they had to work literally right through the night to buy their food, to pay for their accommodation. They were living in the city, their families were out in the villages, and they were falling asleep in class. They just could not learn. So we started supporting the uni students more so that they didn't have to work and they could eat. Again, not paying for everything, but just to break the back for them. That's amazing. Our guest in conversation today is David Ryan, and he's here from Heart for Kids, and you can call in right now on 1-800-316-316 with a question or a comment, or shoot us your text on 0447 488 316. And Dave, going forward from that one foster home that you had in China, as the work of China Heart grew and then eventually morphed into what is today Heart for Kids, how did the footprint grow in China initially? We started praying. Everything starts with prayer. It does, doesn't it? We started praying, and my simple prayer was, God, is it only China? You know,
Okay, wow.
That was it. And to this day, we continue to pray, God, just make us sure that we're on the right track doing what you want us to do, where you want us to do it, and how you want us to do it. And from those original prayers, we had a sense of God pointing us towards India and towards Indonesia. Now,
Okay.
I'd been to Bali and taken a couple of teams in the late 90s, so that wasn't a huge leap. We had ministry contacts and friends there.
Right.
India was a big leap. I'd never again had it on my radar. You know, it wasn't on my travel zone, so to speak, you know, like China wasn't. But I started talking to some friends of mine, and they introduced me to somebody and to somebody else, and some work started on the west coast of India, and that lasted for a couple of years before the government changed some rulings and regulations and started sending kids home from children's homes back to their village of origins, which was for better or for most often worse.
Right.
But then, out of the blue, another pastor contacted me and said, "Look, I've got this fellow from India coming in a couple of weeks' time." He said, "I don't even know how I got connected to him to host him.
Wow.
But he's staying with me for a few days. You do ministry in India, so would you like to come over?" And I'm thinking, okay, I don't know the connection other than two really different ministry areas and so on. But I went over for a cup of coffee just to hear what he does and to share what we do. And, you know, from that cup of coffee, from that saying, yes, I'll come over and have a cup of coffee, God has just developed some amazing stuff in India. And it's by far our biggest area of ministry now.
Wow. It sounds like a similar story to the one you shared before. That wasn't your breakthrough, that was God's breakthrough.
It's always God's breakthrough.
I love it. It's always. And for those around Australia right now who are waiting for a breakthrough, just remember, it's not your breakthrough, it's God's.
It's God's. You start with prayer and then you wait on him.
Absolutely. And so from that initial cup of coffee, that conversation that you guys had together, that's blossomed out into the largest work that you guys are doing.
Yeah.
What does that look like now?
So we started supporting them with a small amount each month for one of their child development centres. We were really just testing the waters. It was like $100 a month sort of thing into one child development centre. And again, if you push that forwards, that was in mid-2019. If you push that forwards to now, we're supporting 5 child development centres. That's around 250 kids each day getting an education for their future. We're supporting women's tailoring schools. So we've just started school number 11, just kicked off a couple of weeks ago. 6 month long. Women learn how to design, cut the materials, do the sewing, repair their machine. They get given a machine at the end of the school so that they can actually do the business in the villages. They can both make and repair clothing for other people. And so many of these women say to me afterwards, you know, it's been wonderful to learn all this stuff, and it's great because we can help people who are less fortunate than ourselves.
Wow.
And that blows me away every time I hear that, because these ladies don't have anything. You know, their husbands are so often living with addictions of either alcohol or drugs, and they've got no dignity, they've got no education, and yet they're helping people that they see are less well off than themselves. And it just blows my mind every time.
Isn't it amazing, the work of God? When it's in our hands, we often don't see the rich nature of the grace of God. We often just see it for the purpose. We see it for the outcome. You know, we work so hard for outcomes in life. Yeah. But that part of the journey, hearts do get changed there, don't they?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And then, as well as those parts of the ministry, we started helping with safe, clean water.
Yes.
You know, most of these kids are living in villages that don't have safe, clean water. They have to walk 3, 4, 5 kilometres to a clean tap, so to speak.
Right.
There's water in their village, but it's controlled often by the temple staff who don't want to share it with those in the lower castes.
What?
And so they literally don't have access to that water tap. The government won't help. The temple staff aren't helping. The village elders can't help. And yet here come these Christians and say, here, we'll give you a water bore. And so now there's water for nearing 200,000 people who don't have to walk or don't have to get sick from the water that they've got in their village.
Praise God, mate.
We've just opened a school in a tent slum village, is the way that they refer to the village.
Sure.
It's families who don't have homes. They live literally in tents. They can be quite transient. They're just looking for work every day, and more often than not, the kids are sent out each day to beg on the streets. Now they have a school for 30 kids in this village. It's a tent, needs to be because it may need to move in a month's time. And I got a note that one of the ladies asked the pastor to send to me recently, and she said, "I'm so glad that this school has now started, because when my children grew up, my sons grew up, we had nowhere to send them. They had no education. And they're doing okay. They're fixing washing machines now, but they're not well off. But now my grandchildren have got a school and got education." And so it's only been going for a couple of months, since June, but they're kicking in, and these kids are getting an education, which is fantastic. And so God's just opened up a lot in India, and we support a home in Sumatra for children, and another kids club, 3 kids clubs in Bali and outlying islands. And God just answered that prayer of, "Where is it, God? Is it only China?" He said, "No, it's not."
And he answered you with another one of his breakthroughs in that place.
Absolutely.
David, you were saying before that initially a lot of breakthrough came for the advancement of the ministry through your business. You're saying the business is no longer operational, or you no longer operate the business.
Yeah.
How does the ministry get funded nowadays?
Purely by our supporters, our child sponsors, and we've got a great network of supporters who step in. And I just, again, I don't know what other words to use, but it blows my mind sometimes when people just put their hand up or send us a check, make a deposit. And I think, wow, where did that come from? We've got a man in South Australia who's a farmer, a dairy farmer, and he just sent a very generous gift a few months ago, totally out of the blue, totally unexpected. And just, I know you use it where you want to use it. And we just have wonderful supporters locally and across the world.
And if there are people out there across Australia in our Vision family right now who would be inspired to get behind this incredible work of David and the team, you can visit their website on heartforkids.org. That's heart, F-O-R, kids. So heartforkids.org, and you can join in and support there. If you want to call in right now, our number for telephone is 1-800-316-316, and for texting is 0447 488 316. And our guest in conversation is David Ryan from Heart for Kids. And David, as you go forward, what do you see the future being for Heart for Kids?
Wow, that is as hard to answer as what did I see 25 years ago.
Okay.
It's kind of like, God, I have my hopes and aspirations, if you like. I want to do as much as possible, as broadly as possible, as deeply as possible, but it's all got to be in God's direction. We get people asking. We've had people recently trying to, I don't mean trying to in the wrong sense, but people pointing us towards Nepal, for instance.
Right.
And I don't know what God's saying there. He's been seemingly bringing people into our picture for the last year or so. I've got no idea if that's going to develop. Somebody just recently asked me about another country. So it may be that God's not done with the ministry just in 3 countries. But every time I've got a great board who are both very releasing but very constraining as well. When I start to talk about doing too much in different places, if I want to do 3 things somewhere, they'll then talk about 2 things and we'll probably settle on 1 thing, until we see it working well, and then the release comes again. They're a great bunch.
It's the difference between the visionary and the practical manager, hey?
Yes. Yeah, but they're a great team, and they're so supportive.
Oh, that's amazing, mate. So can you tell us about, you shared a little bit about all of the wells that have been put down and the education support that's happening in India. But in Sumatra and Bali, what's the activities there?
Yeah, so in Sumatra, we got introduced to a young man and his wife who were caring for 15 or 16 children who'd come from another island that had been decimated by a tsunami. And the economy's just never recovered. And these kids' families just had nothing to support them with, nothing to make sure they got through school. Even feeding and clothing them was more than a minor struggle. And so we've been supporting them so that they all got their education. So all kids are getting their education, their books, their uniforms every start of the year. We're making sure there's food in the kitchen, so to speak. When I opened up the fridge, I'm a bit nosy, and when I first went there, I poked my nose around the place, and I opened up the small fridge. It wasn't as big as my fridge at home, for instance, and they had 20 people. I opened up the small fridge. On one shelf, there was a bunch of vegetables, and in another section, there was a couple of handfuls of meat.
Wow.
And that was all. And that was for the day and for the days ahead. So we're making sure they've got food in the place, the education in the place. We've provided beds. They were sleeping on thin foam mattresses on the floor. They now have bunks and mattresses that we would say are just normal everyday sleeping things, and sheets and pillows. It's incredible, the small things that they need. One of the local people up in the island gave us a whole bunch of small desks for them, so the kids actually had somewhere to do their homework and study.
Wow.
Until then, they were sitting on the concrete floor. We've just tiled that concrete floor.
Okay.
And so the opportunities continue on. So that's what's happening in Sumatra. In Bali, we have a partner there who is doing a great job with kids clubs, as they're called locally. So 2 kids clubs on the island of Bali, one on an outlying island.
Mm-hmm.
And they meet after school a couple of times a week, and they learn English, they learn about relationships and where the kids fit in to the village and to their family and so on, and respect. They do crafts and games. They celebrate their birthdays, which is not a common thing to do always, in some areas. So they celebrate life, and they learn about God. Across all of these programs, they learn about God. We're helping in physical ways, but always with the goal to create relationships where people want to know and often ask, why are you doing this? When our own people won't help, when our own local temples won't help, why are you doing this? And these kids, it's amazing to see them pray. Some pray in a Christian form with their hands one way. Some pray in a non-Christian form with their hands another way, and so on. But families invite them in and welcome them, for the most part, to because they're caring for their kids. Yeah, and they see value in that.
And we've only got a few minutes left here in this conversation, which seems it's gone so quickly. What are some of the perhaps difficulties that you face in fulfilling this kind of a call?
I guess there's personal difficulties, and then there's ministry difficulties, if you like. We've never been money driven in our outlook on things. We've often said, God, what you give us, we'll spend. And if we would like to do a project, we'll ask, and then when you provide, we'll go that way. I started talking to a friend earlier in the year or late last year about the proposed school in the tent village. At that point, we had no budget line for it, no idea. It was just I wanted to do it. Before we finished, or as we walked back to the car after lunch, he turned around to me and said, "Don't let your board say no because of money."
Okay.
And that was all it took. And he basically underwrote like nearly 100% of it, he and his wife, who are Queenslanders. So a generous people up here, and that's not all they do, but God provides where we're not sure where it's going to come from. And then there's the personal side. It's not easy going in and out of country areas like this. And it just takes its toll sometimes emotionally. You get connected with kids and families whose needs are so great. One young girl that we had prayed with many times in India sadly passed away, and we became aware of it on our team this time last year. But they described it, she's done her job. She's led so many, she was only like 14 or 15. She's led so many and pointed so many to the Lord, and now she's done her job and he's taken her home. And we sat and prayed with the family and the community that day, and it was just, it still lifts the hair on my arm, so to speak, just the real rawness of that community. It had only just happened. And to see them, looking at that and saying, yes, we've lost somebody that we love, we've lost our daughter, but God's got her. And so everything that we do is pointing people towards God.
Pointing people towards God. That's like the mission of Vision Christian Radio, helping you look to God daily.
It is.
As a final thought, just about missions work, what would you share with our audience, our Vision family around Australia?
Yeah. Look, I think wherever the word can be proclaimed is a good thing. And Vision do amazing work, and getting the ministry out there. Every day I get my word for the day come into my inbox, and during the day I read through it. And I often end up praying for you guys.
Thank you.
I haven't said that to you before at all, Tosh, but I often end up, when I've read through that and thinking, that's really just hit a chord for me today, and pray for you guys. And so we could all do that.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.